안녕하세요. 꾸준한 영어 테드쌤입니다. 오늘은 챕터 2 전에 읽어드리는 시로 The Road Not Taken 이라는 시를 선택해보았습니다. 이 시는 한국과 미국, 아니 영미권에서도 굉장히 사랑받는 시로서 로버트 프로스트라고 하는 시인에서 쓰여졌습니다. 원래 미국에서 인정받지 못하다가 영국에서 출간한 시집의 성공으로 다시 미국으로 돌아왔고요. 굉장히 많은 미국인들과 영국인들 그리고 일본인들에게 사랑을 받는 시로서 가지 않은 길이라는 제목으로 인해서 더 많은 사랑을 받았다고 합니다. 지금도 물론 받고 있고요. 가지 않은 길이라는 의미가 주는 이 인생의 선택과 비유가 되는 내용인데요. 두 갈래의 길을 두고 결국 한 가지 길을 선택하게 되고 나 후회할 것을 알면서도 한 가지 길을 선택해야 되는 인생의 비유라고 합니다. 하지만 이제 번역은 그러니까 해석은 각자의 생각과 각자의 상상에 따라서 달라질 수 있는 겁니다. 정확한 해석은 각자에게 맡겨두고 저는 이 시를 감상해 볼 수 있도록 최대한 열심히 읽어보도록 하겠습니다. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, and be one traveler, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as far that the passing there had worn them really about the same, and both that morning equally lay, it leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how we read on two way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. 와우, 굉장히 멋진 시입니다. 여러분들에게도 좋은 의미가 전달될 수 있도록 원문은 아래쪽에 실어볼 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 자, 오늘도 Chapter 2 낭독을 해보도록 하겠습니다. Chapter 2 Music in the Night. I feel at this time there are a few things you should know about Chester. He's not your ordinary cat, but then I'm not your ordinary dog, since an ordinary dog wouldn't be writing this book, would he? Chester came into the house several years ago as a birthday gift for Mr. Monroe, along with 2 volumes of G.K. Chesterton, hence the name Chester, and the first edition of Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. As a result of this introduction to literature, and given the fact that Mr. Monroe is an English professor, Chester developed a taste of reading early in life. I, on the other hand, have developed a taste for books. I found Jonathan Livingston Seagull particularly delicious. From Chester's kittenhood on, Mr. Monroe has used him as a sounding board for all his student lectures. If Chester doesn't fall asleep when Mr. Monroe is talking, the lecture can be counted a success. Every night, when the family is sleeping, Chester goes to the bookshelf, selects his midnight reading, and calls up on his favorite chair. He especially likes mystery stories and the tales of horror, and the supernatural. As a result, he has developed a very vivid imagination. I'm telling you this because I think it's important for you to know something of Chester's background before I relate to you the story of the events following the arrival of Bunnicula into our home. Let me begin with that first night. It seems that after I went to sleep, Chester, still stewing over the lost milk, settled down with his latest book and attempted to ignore the rumbling in his stomach. The room was dark and quiet. This did not prevent his reading, of course, since, as you know, cats can see in the dark. A shaft of moonlight fell across the rabbit's cage and spilled onto the floor below. The wind and the rain had stopped, and as Chester read Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, he became increasingly aware of the eerie stillness that had taken their place. As Chester tells it, he suddenly felt compelled to look at the rabbit. I don't know what came over me, he said to me the next morning, but a cold chill ran down my spine. The little bunny had begun to move for the first time since he had been put in his cage. He lifted his tiny nose and inhaled deeply, as if gathering sustenance from the moonlight. He slicked his ears back close to his body, and for the first time, Chester said, I noticed the peculiar marking on his forehead. What had seemed an ordinary black spot between his ears took on a strange V-shape, which connected with the big black patch that covered his back and each side of his neck. It looked as if he was wearing a cloak. No, more like a cape than a coat. Through the silence had drifted the strains of remote and exotic music. I could have sworn it was a gypsy violin. Chester told me. I thought perhaps a caravan was passing by, so I ran to the window. I remembered my mother telling me something about caravans when I was a puppy, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember what. What's a caravan? I asked, feeling a little stupid. A caravan is a band of gypsies traveling through the forest in their wagons. Chester answered. Oh yes. It was coming back to me now. Station wagons? No, covered wagons. The gypsies travel all through the land, setting up camps around the great bonfires, doing magical tricks, and sometimes, if you cross their palms with a piece of silver, they will tell your fortune. You mean if I gave them a fork, they'd tell my fortune? I asked briskly. Chester looked at me with disdain. Save your silverware, he said. It wasn't a caravan after all. I was disappointed. What was it? I asked. Chester explained that when he looked out the window, he saw Professor Micklewine, our next-door neighbor, playing the violin in his living room. He listened for a few moments to the haunting melody and sighed with relief. He thought, it's beginning to affect my mind. He yawned and turned to go back to his chair and to catch some sleep. As he turned, however, he was startled by what he saw. There, in the moonlight, as the music filtered through the air, sat the bunny, his eyes intense and staring, an unearthly aura about them. Now this is the part you won't believe, Chester said to me. But as I watched, his lips parted in a hideous smile, and where a rabbit's buck teeth should have been, two little pointed fangs glistened. I wasn't sure what to make of Chester's story, but the way he told it set my hair on end. Chapter 2. Music in the Night. I feel at this time there are a few things you should know about Chester. He is not your ordinary cat, but then I'm not your ordinary dog. Since an ordinary dog wouldn't be writing this book, would he? Chester came into the house several years ago as a birthday gift for Mr. Monroe, along with 2 volumes of G.K. Chesterton. hence the name Chester, and the first edition of Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities as a result of this introduction to literature, and given the fact that Mr. Monroe is an English professor, Chester developed a taste of reading early in life. I, on the other hand, have developed a taste for books. I found Jonathan Livingston Seagull particularly delicious. From Chester's kittenhood on, Mr. Monroe has used him as a sounding board for all his students' lectures. If Chester doesn't fall asleep when Mr. Monroe is talking, the lecture can be counted a success. Every night, when the family is sleeping, Chester goes to the bookshelf, selects his midnight reading, and curls up on his favorite chair. He especially likes mystery stories and tales of horror and supernatural. As a result, he has developed a very vivid imagination. I'm telling you this because I think it's important for you to know something of Chester's background before I relate to you the story of the event following the arrival of Bunnicula into our home. Let me begin with that first night. It seems that after I went to sleep, Chester, still stewing over the lost milk, settled down with his latest book and attempted to ignore the rumbling in his stomach. The room was dark and quiet. This did not prevent his reading. Of course, since as you know, cats can see in the dark. A shaft of moonlight fell across the rabbit's cage and spilled onto the floor below. The wind and the rain had stopped, and as Chester read Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, he became increasingly aware of the eerie stillness that had taken their place. As Chester tells it, he suddenly felt compelled to look at the rabbit. "I don't know what came over me," he said to me the next morning, but a cold chill ran down my spine. The little bunny had begun to move for the first time since he had been put in his cage. He lifted his tiny nose and inhaled deeply, as if gathering sustenance from the moonlight. He slicked his ears back close to his body, and for the first time, Chester said, I noticed the peculiar marking on his forehead. What had seemed an ordinary black spot between his ears took a strange V-shape, which connected with the big black patch that covered his back and each side of his neck. It looked as if he was wearing a coat. No, more like a cape than a coat. Through the silence had drifted the strains of remote and exotic music. I could have sworn it was a gypsy violin, Chester told me. I thought perhaps a caravan was passing by, so I ran to the window. I remembered my mother telling me something about caravans when I was a puppy, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember what. What's a caravan? I asked, feeling a little stupid. A caravan is a band of gypsies traveling through the forest in their wagons. Chester answered. Ah, yes. It was coming back to me now. Station wagons? No, curved wagons. The gypsies travel all through the land, setting up camps around great bonfires, doing magical tricks, and sometimes, if you cross their palms with a piece of silver, they will tell your fortune. You mean if I gave them a fork, they'd tell my fortune? I asked breathlessly. Chester looked at me with disdain. Save your silverware, he said. It wasn't a caravan after all. I was disappointed. What was it? I asked. Chester explained that when he looked out the window, he saw Professor Micklewhite, our next-door neighbor, playing the violin in his living room. He listened for a few moments to the haunting melody and sighed with relief. I've really got to stop reading these terrorist horror stories late at night, he thought. It's beginning to affect my mind. He yawned and turned to go back to his chair and get some sleep. As he turned, however, He was startled by what he saw. There in the moonlight, as the music filtered through the air, sat the bunny, his eyes intense and staring, and an unearthly aura about them. Now this is the part you wouldn't believe, Chatter said to me. But as I watched, his lips parted in a hideous smile, and where rabbit buckteeth should have been, two little pointed fangs glistened. I wasn't sure what to make of Chester's story, but the way he told it, it set my hair on end. Chapter 2, Music in the Night. I feel at this time there are a few things you should know about Chester. He is not your ordinary cat, then I'm not your ordinary dog, since an ordinary dog wouldn't be writing this book, would he? Chester came into the house several years ago as a birthday gift for Mr. Monroe, along with 2 volumes of G.K. Chesterton, hence the name Chester, and the first edition of Dickens' The Tale of Two Cities. As a result of this introduction to literature, and given the fact that Mr. Monroe is an English professor, Chester developed a taste of reading early in life. I, on the other hand, have developed a taste for books. I found Jonathan Livingston Seagull particularly delicious. From Chester's kittenhood on, Mr. Monroe has used him as a sounding board for all his student lectures. If Chester doesn't fall asleep when Mr. Monroe is talking, the lecture can be counted a success. Every night, when the family is sleeping, Chester goes to the bookshelf, selects his midnight reading, and curls up on his favorite chair. He especially likes mystery stories, detectives, tales of horror, and supernatural. As a result, he has developed a very vivid imagination. I'm telling you this because I think it's important for you to know something of Chester's background before I relate to you the story of the event following the arrival of Bonicola into our home. Let me begin with that first night. It seems that after I went to sleep, Chester still stewing over the lost milk, settled down with his latest book and attempted to ignore the rumbling in his stomach. The room was dark and quiet. This did not prevent his reading. Of course, since, as you know, cats can see in the dark. A shaft of moonlight fell across the rabbit cage and spilled onto the floor below. The wind and the rain had stopped, and as Chester read Edgar Allan Poe's The Fall of the House of Usher, he became increasingly aware of the eerie stillness that had taken their place. As Chester tells it, he suddenly felt compelled to look at the rabbit. I don't know what came over me, he said to me the next morning, but a cold chill ran down my spine. The little bunny had begun to move for the first time since he had been put in his cage. He lifted his tiny nose and inhaled deeply, as if gathering sustenance from the moonlight. He slicked his ears back close to his body, and for the first time, Chester said, I noticed the mercurial marking on his forehead. What had seemed an ordinary black spot between his ears took on a strange V-shape, which connected with the big black patch that covered his back and each side of his neck. It looked as if he was wearing a coat. No, more like a cape than a coat. Through the silence had drifted the strains of remote and exotic music. I could have sworn it was a gypsy violin, Chester told me. I thought perhaps a caravan was passing by, so I ran to the window. I remembered my mother telling me something about a caravan when I was a puppy, but for the life of me, I couldn't remember what. What's a caravan? I asked, feeling a little stupid. Caravan is a band of gypsies traveling through the forest in their wagons, Chester answered. Oh yes, it was coming back to me now. Station wagons? No, covered wagons. The gypsies travel all through the land, setting up camps around great bonfires, doing magical tricks, and sometimes, if you cross their palms with a piece of silver, they will tell your fortune. You mean if I gave them a pork, they'd tell my fortune? I asked mercilessly. Chester looked at me with disdain. Save your silverware, he said. It wasn't a caravan after all. I was disappointed. What was it? I asked. Chester explained that when he looked out the window, he saw Professor Micklewhite, our next-door neighbor, playing the violin in his living room. He listened for a few moments to the haunting melody and sighed with relief. I've really got to stop reading these horror stories late at night, he thought. It's beginning to affect my mind. He yawned and turned to go back to his chair and get some sleep. As he turned, however, he was startled by what he saw. There in the moonlight, as the music filtered through the air, sat the bunny, his eyes intense and staring, an unearthly aura about them. Now this is the part you won't believe, Chester said to me. But as I watched, his lips parted in a hideous smile, and where a rabbit's buck teeth should have been, two little pointed fangs glistened. I wasn't sure what to make of Chester's story, but the way he told it, it set my hair on end. 오늘은 세 번만 읽도록 하겠습니다. 귀가 혹시도 깊은 잠이 들었네요. 여러분도 좋은 꿈 꾸시기 바랍니다. 저도 오늘 여기까지 하겠습니다.